think before I begin, I kind of wanted to get a feel for everybody's experience related to star beings. You know, is everybody here a contactee? Like, have you had contact experiences? No, yes? No? Okay.
Not in the physical dimension, but
Okay.
other dimensions.
Other dimension?
Well,
Okay.
once I took LSD, maybe.
Excellent. it's an excellent assistant, actually. I may mention some mushrooms actually in a few minutes. So,
Great.
yeah. Anybody that you've had contact experience? Yeah.
Yeah, in other dimensions.
Okay. And these experiences that we've had, have they been positive, negative, neutral?
Positive.
Positive.
I mean, are you talking about like angel guides and so forth?
Well,
manifesting
that would
themselves?
qualify too,
All right,
for sure.
People who died. They
Okay.
died. Yeah.
Yeah, I would qualify that too. This
Yes.
is, I mean, I think in our modern world, we look at star beings, UFOs, extraterrestrials as kind of a fixed concept, but you know, there are people like Graham Hancock that has written in his book Supernatural, and he talks in lectures about this, how he believes that some of the experiences that people are having as contact experiences with UFOs or with extraterrestrials, star beings I call them, that they may actually be more accurately like multi-dimensional beings that in the past human civilization would call them angels or like spiritual guides or things like that. So any type of contact I think is completely valid, you know, and I'm just kind of curious. In my experience, I've had almost entirely very positive contact with star beings. I have had one experience that I'm aware of that was negative, but still there's no trauma around that experience, and so I just wanted to be mindful in my speaking. I'm going to be speaking very positively about this, and I didn't want to trigger anybody into a state of trauma as I'm like speaking about star beings. So that's primarily why I asked. I want to make sure everybody was in. And also for you, Tony, have you had positive contacts or negative or?
Not physical, but
Not physical, okay. Yeah, and were they, what was like the nature, were they positive, the contacts? Okay, cool. Excellent, so, yay, thank you again. I'm honored to be here and to share. I really enjoy sharing this information. In many ways, I feel that it's almost like a soul mission for me. Several years after my close encounter, I began receiving very strong guidance to be very open and very public about sharing the information, primarily to get rid of this fear that we get programmed into around the star beings. So kind of creating a place of balance with that. So I put together a slideshow that'll like help, I think, in some ways to explain what I do. And so I just kind of titled it, you know, How My Close Encounter in 2004 Has Shaped My Life and My Work. And that really is true, that my whole life since 2004 has gone into a very different direction than I thought I was headed at that time. And so we're going to talk about some of that. So, you know, why are we here tonight? These are some good questions. Why have we come to this earth? You know, and this kind of goes into the core of what I teach in my workshops, of recognizing that every single one of us has a unique gift or purpose, or perhaps a unique dream that we are here to dream into manifestation. If you are in this room or if you are at my workshops, you know, I believe that absolutely that you would qualify as what we call a light worker. And that's, you know, now today maybe that's a little bit of a cliche term, but I think it really is still appropriate, talking about how we bring in frequencies of light, you know, sometimes frequencies of sound, and it's like these energies run through us and they go out into the world right now to help us to create a new world. And so all of us are here, you know, together tonight, I believe, because we're connected in that way. We're also here to talk about star beings, or at least I'm here to talk about them, and I would love to hear you talk about them too. And again, like I always refer to them as star beings because I feel that that creates again, a sense of balance, like the word alien. It's funny, David Wilcock, he'll laugh about that, saying that like alien is almost like, calling somebody like a bad name. It's almost like racist towards the star beings. And I agree. I think with, when you look at Hollywood and you see 20 movies that talk about UFOs, 19 of those movies are going to have them killing us and like taking our resources and going to war, and we have to defend ourselves against them. And it's only like that 1 out of 20 that actually talks about them in a positive way, or that this could actually be a supportive situation. So by referring to them as star beings, it's probably more accurate, number one, because they are from star systems, including our own. They're not necessarily alien. They may actually have been here for a lot longer than human beings have been. So I like that term. Also, holographic reality and vibrational densities or dimensions. So I already kind of touched upon that, in that when we try to understand the nature of these beings that we're in contact with or that we're witnessing, asking questions about like, well, what is their actual nature? Maybe they are other dimensional. Maybe they're not physical beings that are like traveling across the vastness of space. Most likely that is not the case, right? They possess technology to phase in and out of different dimensions, perhaps. So that's something that I teach a lot about, is understanding how energy vibrates in different states, and that those different vibrational states relate to different stages of consciousness or different abilities to access consciousness. Holographic reality is also an important concept, to understand that the nature of our reality is like a hologram. It's definitely applicable in the healing work that I do, that when we heal something, if you clear an energetic pattern and you receive an upload of a new pattern, it's like it goes to source, energy comes back, that energy or that information gets uploaded through the entire human hologram, because all human beings are connected through our DNA, which is holographic. And so it's like that healing potential goes out to everybody on Earth, maybe all human beings everywhere. Working with these star beings, there is absolutely a core understanding about reality being holographic. And so I wanted to mention that as a concept, at least, of how we can work with these guys. So how did I end up here? And also, the healing modality that I practice is called gamma wave healing. And so like, how did I get to this place? And then like, what is that all about? So as a child, when I came into this world, I actually have found out that I had a walk-in experience. Are we familiar with that term, walk-in?
No.
No? So most people that speak about a walk-in is kind of an extreme situation where like maybe you're 27 years old and you end up in a car wreck, and then you wake up out of your coma and you're no longer the same person. Your body is the same, but there's a different like personality. There's an entirely different being that is occupying the physical body that you used to occupy. That's kind of like an extreme case of a walk-in, and it's called a walk-in like you have walked into a physical body, your consciousness has. So a lot of people talk about being a walk-in, especially within the kind of like ascension movement or the New Age movement, and I believe that for many people it's absolutely true, that consciousness can like change its vehicle. My experience was much different than that, and I didn't even know that it had happened as like a walk-in until I was an adult and was working with some plant medicines, and I was told that an experience that I had when I was 2 years old, and I overdosed on my dad's blood pressure pills. My dad had high blood pressure, and my mother came out and found me drinking out of the dog's water. I was like on the floor drinking out of the water, and there were pills everywhere. And we didn't even have a telephone. We had literally moved into this new house the day before in a new city in the middle of Nevada, out in the desert. And so my mom didn't even know where the hospital was. and like threw me in the car with my two sisters and started driving and was like slapping me to keep me awake. You know, like shocking experience. I can't even imagine if I had to do that for my children. Sorry, Mom. And it ended up a guardian angel. This is the first time that I know that I'd met a guardian angel. A police officer on a motorcycle pulled up to our car out in the middle of nowhere, you know, like right up behind the car, and then took us to the hospital. They pumped my stomach, and I was screaming, and then I was unconscious for 24 hours. I was just out. And they said, you know, if your son doesn't wake up at 24 hours, he probably will have brain damage. And I woke up like right at 24 hours, and I sat up and I looked around. I guess I don't remember this, but evidently my mom and dad said I looked around and I said, where are my trucks? Like my toy trucks, you know? And everything then supposedly was okay, you know, and life went on. But what I was shown, you know, in my 30s, probably my early 30s, late 20s, was that in that moment that the being that I am now came in and like interfaced with the being that was in my body before then, and that being kind of transitioned out. But like I have some memory from before that event, and very, very, very few. Like I have memories of like crawling around and like smelling my grandfather's feet, you know, and things like that. But in that moment, there was some kind of an exchange. And so I've been me, you know, my entire life as far as I can remember. But when I came in, after that walk-in, I had abilities that were definitely different than other children. I would have dreams all the time that would come true. Like I was dreaming the future, which actually began to really bother me when I was probably about 7 years old. And I would try to change the situation so that the dream would not come true, and I could never change it, and it was like it scared me. I could see auras, although I didn't know that was special or different. I had no idea that's what I was seeing again until I was in my 20s, and I went to Sedona, Arizona, and a woman pointed out this aura, and I saw that, and I was like, that's an aura? I've seen that my entire life, you know. Sorry? Out of body experiences, OBE is out of body experience. And so when I was a teenager, I started having out of body experiences where I thought that I was awake in my body, and I would like go walking through the house and I would encounter my cousin or my mom, and I would have a conversation and they couldn't see me. And I thought they were just ignoring me, and I thought that I was like, that's rude, you know. But I was really like projecting out of my body. And then I would corroborate it. It wasn't a dream. I would like have a conversation. You know, my cousin said, I was in the kitchen last night, but you weren't in the kitchen. Like, what are you talking about? So, you know, many things I could talk with animals. You know, many things that probably you all are familiar with, maybe in some way, some of these types of things. I have since learned also as an adult that I probably was having encounter experiences while I was a child. Is anybody familiar with this researcher named Mary Rodwell?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, you know Mary
She
Rodwell?
came last year for a conference.
Yes.
Oh, she did?
For exopolitics.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to attend one of her presentations. There was a video on YouTube that I caught a few years ago that I think it was called like The New Humans.
Yes.
Yeah, so when I watched The New Humans, I was like goosebumps the whole time, because there was so much of what she was talking about, probably like 60% of what these people were relating as their experiences. I totally relate to that. Like it was so familiar, I thought the only explanation is that I had those experiences also, and I just don't remember them, you know. But as a child, I always knew that extraterrestrials were real, and I knew that they were good. Like I would see movies and I'm like, this is not true, you know. So that probably was happening, but again, I have no conscious memory, and I haven't tried like hypnosis to go back into those experiences, although that could be fun. The Perseid meteor shower in 1996. So that was, this would be the mushroom experience, where I was with a group of 19 friends. I was in college, and we all all these high school friends, we all got together at Ohio University, and which is famous for partying. And we ate some mushrooms during the Perseid meteor shower, and I went away with two of my friends. Everybody else was like off having their own kind of adventure, and the three of us went and we laid down in a field, and no lights around us, and we're watching this meteor shower. It was incredible. And during that meteor shower, we literally, my two friends are literally, one is asking the other one, says, "So what do you think? Do you think aliens are real?" And the other friend says, "Yeah, I think aliens are real." And right in that moment, I spontaneously astral projected out of my body, and I went to the great central sun of the Milky Way.
Oh.
And this is before I knew anything about the great central sun. I was like a sophomore in college or something. And when I arrived there, what I saw, I was inside of a torus. So the geometry of a torus, it looks like a donut. Basically, it's a field of energy, like our aura, right? It like comes up and goes out and comes up on all sides. And so I was on the inside of this torus, and the torus was composed of like 1 million stars. Everywhere I looked, it was stars, like complete solar systems, stars everywhere. And in the middle was God. It was like the creator was in the middle, and it was a black hole.
Oh.
There was this point of consciousness in the center of the torus that everything was emanating out of. And I'm laying there in this field in Ohio, my body is, and tears just like spontaneously, I'm like crying hard silently. And my friends are going, "Oh yeah, I think aliens are real." And I'm sitting there experiencing that life is everywhere. This is like what the universe does. It makes life. And I was aware that it all was emanating out of this source, And then I came back into my body, and I was just like, "Oh my God," And then I thought, can I go back there? And immediately I spontaneously went back there, and again saw this, and was just imprinted with this knowing. It was like an awakening experience, and knowing that like we are all connected. Consciousness is everywhere in the universe, and it was really, really overwhelming. And it stayed with me, and I really feel like that was kind of a like primer, to get me going with these next experiences. The big one that really shaped my life was on April 12th of 2004. I had a close encounter while hiking in the mountains above my house in Taos, New Mexico. I did not expect that to happen that day. And it was definitely not an ordinary experience in my life, although, again, living in New Mexico and being who I was, it didn't shock me. It was like, it was not quite normal, but it was totally acceptable. But I'll talk about that on the next slide. Dolphins also, I include the dolphins because the dolphins are star beings. They come from Sirius B. There's Sirius A and Sirius B have what we call cetaceans. The whales, they come from Sirius A, and the dolphins come from Sirius B. And I've had some close encounters with dolphins that really shaped my experience as well. And I've got a slide for that too. So what is gamma wave healing? So gamma wave healing is this healing modality that has developed through me since my close encounter. And what I've learned is that during the close encounter, my DNA was activated in a particular way that would enable me to begin doing energetic healing work. It's called gamma wave healing because my guide, who we're going to see here in a second, that is from my close encounter, I asked her at one point, years after my close encounter, it was probably in 2009 or 2010, somewhere in there, I asked her once, what should I call this healing work that I'm doing? And she told me, if you need a name for this work, you can call it gamma wave healing. And I said, well, why gamma wave healing? And she said, well, because when you're doing the work, you enter into a gamma brain wave, and all of the work is being facilitated at that frequency, which is a very high frequency. Like, are we familiar with the brain states? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's why my modality is called gamma wave healing. We're also going to get a little bit into the true history of humanity on Earth, which relates to star beings. And then also how the star beings are working with humanity right now, because there's a lot that's going on right now. So this is the closest photograph I've ever found, or I say photograph, I always feel like it's a photograph and that it's not like some CG thing, but this is the closest image I've ever found to the being that was piloting the spacecraft that I had my close encounter with. So April 12th, 2004, it was really kind of an interesting moment. My ex-wife and I had just conceived our son, and we didn't know it at the time that she was pregnant, but like 2 days before this, I think, we had conceived our son. And so there was this big energetic opening that was going on in our lives, and we were about to go take a cruise in the Caribbean, as at the time we were engaged, and she was going to meet my mother for the first time, and we were going to go with my mom on this cruise and look for destinations for a wedding. We wanted to get married in the Caribbean. And so, you know, it was kind of a big moment, and I'd been working really hard, and I had the day off right before our cruise, so I went for a hike, and I thought I was going to have a shamanic experience of encountering elk. You know, like I have elk medicine very strongly. I see elk all the time when I go hiking, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to go see some elk today. And I went for this hike. I went way up into the mountains, and was in the middle of the national forest, totally alone. There was nobody out there that day, and I reached the place where I thought I was going to see the elk, and I kind of sat down and waited, and I could hear elk walking around, but they wouldn't come near me because it was kind of cold. Like April in Taos, New Mexico is like, there's still snow on the ground in the mountains, you know, but it's sunny. It was really, really a sunny day with a partly cloudy sky. And that's like my memory of when the spacecraft showed up. I just put on my backpack and was going to hike back home. And I must have heard or felt the spacecraft come in because I looked straight up, and right above me comes this sound. It went like that, but it was much, much lower. The frequency was the lowest frequency I've ever been exposed to. And the craft itself was invisible, but I could see it. It was like the movie Predator. Yeah, so it was like I could see the shape of it very, very clearly, but it was like the light was being bent around the craft. So it was like quote unquote invisible, but you could see it. But inside my third eye, like in my mind, I saw it clear as day. It was shaped like an almond, like the nut, an almond. So it was pointy on one side and like kind of bluntly rounded on the other side. Like that was the back, and the front was pointy. And it was about 10 meters long, probably, like 30 feet roughly. And it was oriented above me like this, like pointing that direction, directly above me. I mean, this is like not coincidence. Like this thing came to see me for sure. And it was right above the trees. So it was about 100 feet, like 30 meters above me. And so it was sitting there emanating this frequency, and waves, intense waves of energy are pulsating off of it, like pounding my body. And every single cell in my body was like being penetrated by this energy. And my immediate thought, like I'm a bit of a geek, my immediate thought was, wow, that's a low frequency. and then my next thought, like immediately after that, was, holy shit, I'm gonna get taken. But I wasn't afraid. Like there was no fear actually. And I immediately thought, wait, no, they're not taking me, they're talking to me. And so I was like, I tried at this time in 2004, I was playing around with metaphysics and was like reading Carlos Castaneda, and I'd already read like Bringers of the Dawn, and so I already was like tuning into my path, but I didn't really know what I was doing with my own energy. And so like I was trying to get into my third eye. I mean, I was probably doing something like that. Like I was trying to like listen to what they were telling me, and I couldn't get anything. So I stopped. Like I just stopped trying to do anything, and I just stood there. And this thing hovered above me for about 30 seconds probably. I'm pretty positive that I didn't lose time. Like this all happened in a span of like maybe 1 minute. This whole encounter happened. And so I'm standing there and and again, it's like almost like by being hit by waves in the ocean. I mean, the energy was indescribable coming off of this craft. And what I've come to understand is that was just the byproduct of the propulsion system. This is just the engine operating like your car running, you know. They like the low frequency was not being directed toward me. It was just from the craft. But what was going on was that they were hitting me with a very, very high frequency, though, that is completely inaudible. Like maybe bats or dolphins could hear it, but like I definitely couldn't hear anything. So I'm standing there for 30 seconds as it's above me, and they finished saying whatever they were saying, and the craft rotated and it flew up the canyon. So like I was in there's this a big canyon that like a highway goes through that kind of runs east and west, and I was in a side canyon that goes up to the Taos Pueblo, to the Indian reservation. And so as I'm standing there, you know, the craft rotated and it flew up this canyon that I'm standing in. And so like as it flew away from me, it was hugging the contour of the land, and it crossed over and behind a ridgeline. And I knew that it had done that because the intensity of the energy immediately dropped. Like I was no longer in direct line of sight with the craft. It was hidden behind a mountain ridge. And I was like, whoa, and the energy dropped. Like I couldn't feel it pounding my body anymore. And then it rose up again, back into direct line of sight, and it was like pounding me again, but it was getting further away. So they call that the Doppler effect. Like you can tell that it was traveling further away from me for sure. And it did that 3 times. So like it crossed over and behind 3 ridge lines. And at this point, it's on the top of the mountain, which is the Taos Pueblo Indian Reservation, which again is like they've been there for thousands of years. Since that experience, I've talked to many of my friends on the Pueblo, and they have a very clear relationship with star beings on the Taos Pueblo, and they don't make that public. But I share my experience, and they share with me that, like, yes, we work with these people, you know. So I don't know if the people I encountered work with them directly, but like they ended up there on the Pueblo, and then the craft turned off. Basically, in my mind, I saw that it landed inside of a lake, like went into water. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's what I saw. And suddenly it was completely silent, and there was not a sound for about 6 seconds. I stood there in total silence, and then I could hear the squirrels and birds and everything in the forest started making sound again, and I realized I'd been in a void of sound, and never in my life had I, even in utero, you know, there's not a void of sound in your life. And it was kind of shocking to like suddenly the noise came back, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was silent.
Was I there?
Yeah, it was wild. And then I just started laughing, and I was like, what the fuck was that, you know? And I just started laughing, and I thought, well, I guess it's time to go home now, you know? And I was like, okay, backpack on, and I went home. I started hiking home. And while I was going back, I had all these insights coming to me about what that whole situation was, many of which were probably important in the moment, but I really didn't understand this close encounter until years later. It was in 2009, probably like around maybe February or March. I began working with a good friend of mine that does past life regression therapy. And the second time that I ever worked with her, she put me under hypnosis into a regression, and we went into this experience. So, which ended up being just a profoundly important lesson for me, because I got information then about what really happened. And so what I was told and who I saw, like the beings that I saw, they looked almost exactly like this, except that the pattern, and this is blue, the color is kind of off. I mean, this looks a little gray, but like their color, it was a woman. There was a man and a woman on board the craft. And their color would be more of like a blue, almost turquoise, like a bluish gray going towards green a little bit. And their face is almost identical to this, with very large eyes and a large elongated head. Except that instead of that pattern, which kind of looks like maybe like a cuttlefish or a tiger shark, there were glyphs that were like light language They look like light language. Have you ever seen people that paint or draw light language?
No.
No, they look like hieroglyphs.
Okay.
And they're, I don't know if I have any in my little image files, but I mean, you can look it up online. There are several artists around the world that are painting light language right now that when you see it, it like resonates in your DNA. This is
Light language.
light language. Yeah, it's like,
I've seen that too in regression.
You have?
Now you say, yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't quite pin it down what it was.
sure.
But yeah.
It's like, how I understand it is like primordial universal language. It's frequency.
Yeah.
And the way that the glyphs look, I mean, they look like Egyptian hieroglyphs, kind of. They're like letters that almost look familiar, but they're not letters from, yeah. And so, you know, she had on her face, they were like bioluminescent tattoos that were light language. So she had these like glyphs on her face and her forehead, on her arms. And I've learned a lot more. I've done many regressions, and now I have open communication with them. So what I was told was that these beings on board this spacecraft are from the star system Alpha Centauri. So have we all heard of Alpha Centauri? Alpha Centauri, sometimes you'll read things about the Alpha Centauri beings as being negative, and that's not true. Like, at least from what I'm told, and I trust this with my life, you know, that the Alpha Centauri beings are a sixth dimensional or sixth vibration civilization. They're human beings, although they look different than us, but they are human beings. We share almost entirely the same kind of DNA, but they're very tall. They're like the women would be 7 feet, so a little bit over 2 meters. I'm not sure where that, if like 2.2 meters maybe, or something, like a very tall basketball player like is 7 feet tall. And the men get up to like 8 or 9 feet tall, so not quite 3 meters, probably like 2.8 meters or something like that. So they're very tall. They have bodies just like us. They have sexual anatomy, although like the women, like I've never have seen like breasts like Earth women would have. You know, they're very slender, but they have hands that have 4 fingers, is what I remember. And obviously, you know, eyes, a face. There's maybe like a nose kind of situation could be there. The big thing around, you know, what they were doing is these actual beings on board that spacecraft, they had come forward in time to find me. They were living in what we now call Peru 63,000 years ago. So again, according to our history, 63,000 years ago in Peru, there was nothing. Like, there were no human beings there. Like, all, you know, that's the story that we're told, and that's not true. This is absolutely like not true what we've been told about our ancient history. So these star beings were on Earth, and they were living on every continent, and primarily were based in Peru. And they were essentially like spiritual ambassadors to the human civilization that we call Lemuria, or Mu. Do we know that? Are you familiar with the name Lemuria? So what we call it, that civilization, Lemuria or Mu, that was spread all around the Pacific Ocean and in South America. And these beings were on Earth helping the human beings of Earth to heal their DNA, and they were working as like spiritual ambassadors. There was open communication. All of the humans on Earth, they knew about these beings. And there were many other star beings, but they in particular are among the highest that were here. We see evidence of them around the world, but especially in Peru with the Paracas skulls. Are you familiar with, ever heard of the skulls in Peru? Right? They have these huge craniums, right? And they're not because they've been bound, you know, they have a larger volume by like 50%. A good friend of mine that I was just in Peru with, he just went to Paracas, and I've got him on my phone. He sent me dozens of photographs of these skulls, and they're all like, some that are really wide, most of them are long. What I've been told is that those skulls are most likely the human hybrids that were like, their DNA was crossed with the star beings from Alpha Centauri. Some of them may actually be Alpha Centauri skulls, but probably not, because they have a more of a crystalline skeleton, like a silica dioxide skeleton, so the skulls would be different. But that's like in that movie, the Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
Terrible movie, but the very end of the movie, they have all of the long skulls, crystal huge skulls. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that's why I watched this terrible movie. It was awful, except for the very end of it. And I believe that to be real, that those beings were there. They built enormous structures on Earth. There were pyramids that they built in Peru that are still standing, but we think that they're mountains. They're literally covered in thousands of years worth of like soil and plant matter, and there are trees growing on them, and they're mountains. So our geologists tell us, but they're not mountains. They're actually pyramids, and they're all over. These structures are all around the world, but they were based primarily in Peru. And so the woman that was the main occupant of this craft, what I was told is that she was a past life incarnation of mine. And so I was existing as this star being 63,000 years ago in linear time. She came forward in time in order to find herself, to find me. And she found me through my DNA, because our DNA emanates a unique energy that is called a frequency signature. Everybody's DNA is unique, right? And our DNA is a hologram that is vibrating, and it's emanating light, it's emanating a frequency. And these beings, many of the star beings, they possess technology, either spiritual technology or physical technology, and they can literally tune into the frequency of your DNA just like a radio station. And it operates in the same exact way, and this is how we can communicate with them, actually. So maybe, I don't know if you want, maybe we could do a guided meditation when we're finished, and we can like connect this and open this energy up. She found herself, she found me, came down, and while the craft was hovering above me, they were hitting me with this really high frequency sound wave, maybe a light wave also, light, whatever, I guess particles. But the high frequency sound wave then went into my DNA, and it cleared certain things and it activated certain things within my DNA, and then they left. And over the course of the years since then, my DNA has continued to change and evolve as a result of this close encounter. And then therefore, like my healing abilities that have come online, they, like every 3 to 6 months, like something new starts happening when I'm working with people. It's like I get new abilities, and that's as a result of this interaction with these star beings. So what I feel like what happened was that they kind of like, it's like taking an arrow and like pointing it in a direction and like letting it go. And so it's like she activated something within me that then went. And so I've been following this path ever since then. And again, I didn't understand that at the time. I thought that it was just like, yeah, extraterrestrials are real. Like that was awesome, But I realized later, like it really has had a huge impact on my life. And I since then, I've done several regressions with her. Also, I have another incarnation that was a man that was living at that same period of time, and he was like one of the very high spiritual ambassadors. Really, really, like lots and lots of information has come in since those regressions. Since that regression work, I have had pretty regular contact. There was a period of time in like 2011, 2012 where I had almost no contact. I would try to communicate with her, and it wasn't happening. But it's been turned back on. So almost always, actually, when I go fly fishing, which I'm a fisherman, and I go fish in the rivers. And that's like my meditation. And there's something about that, getting into the water and being completely alone, where that channel of communication opens very clearly, and I have conversations just as I'm speaking with you now. Any questions around that? The close encounter or anything? Anything you want to know?
Yeah, the being you met. How did you said it looked kind of bluish.
Yeah.
What about the eyes?
Eyes were like yellowish.
Yellowish, but were they like, what what normally people portray like full dark or whatever.
No, they like this.
Like this.
I mean, this is like this face. I mean, this is
Okay.
like Alpha Centauri. This is nearly identical to what I see every single time I either meditate or have a regression, and I see the Alpha Centauri beings. The differences are cosmetic, like they're minor. But her eyes look like that, except that this color is going to be towards yellow.
Is there any purple in it, something like that?
In their skin, I
Yeah.
sometimes see purple.
Yeah.
It's primarily bluish green, but it can, the different, just like Earth humans,
Okay.
there are variations, I think. The ones that I directly work with, those two that I directly work with, are very much like a turquoise bluish green with like a little bit of like a gray maybe in there, or it could be a purple like lavender. But their skin is kind of not iridescent, but there's like a shimmer to it, which maybe because of their vibration. I mean, these are 6 density beings. They don't have to be in physical bodies. My understanding about these star beings is when what we consider to be like ascended would be 5th dimensional, right?
Do you know if they reincarnate on Earth?
If they what?
If they reincarnate on Earth?
They do.
Okay.
That's kind of that's funny. I hadn't thought to share that, but this is what I'm doing here. Okay, so this is what I've come to understand in doing work with these beings, is that when I had my walk-in experience when I was 2 years old, that she, my guide, she projected, or actually it wasn't her. It's a man that he projected into this world. They have this technology that is really incredible, and I've seen this through regression work. It actually was creating. I was having a lot of emotional stress back in this would have been in probably about 2013, where during my life, and many things had changed in 2011, 2012. And it's like we closed our business, the economy had crashed, and was under an enormous amount of stress. Or I owned a gallery, and simultaneously my wife and I were having a hard time. There was a lot of pain around both of our hearts that wasn't being healed, and I was having a lot of stress around living my soul purpose, like what I've come to understand as my mission, and feeling like if I lived that mission to its fullest, I was going to have to leave my family. So I had like a lot of conflict that was really weighing heavily on my heart, and so I did a regression, and in that regression I was taken out, my consciousness was taken out of this incarnation, and I was put into communication with myself, and at a higher level. And what I was shown was that these beings from Alpha Centauri and many other star beings, what they're doing right now and how they're working on Earth is what we call star seeds. Are you familiar with the term star seed?
Yes.
So what I have come to understand about what a star seed is that these high beings will drop in density. They will use technology to project their consciousness down into the earth, and they will incarnate into a human body, sometimes as a walk-in, other times at birth. Like they'll come in utero and be born into the world, which is like, those are my children. Like that's very clearly my children are star beings. They're incredible. And so what happened with me is that when this body was 2 years old, I came in, I was projected in, and you have a full human experience in every way. And what was happening to me emotionally, and I was beginning to be torn, like I didn't want to choose my family or my mission. And so they allowed me to step out of this experience during a regression, and I was able to communicate with my partner, my tantric twin flame partner, whatever you want to call her, that is Alpha Centauri. And I came to understand then that I don't have to make that choice. This is an illusion of being human, was that I felt I was being forced into a choice, and I don't have to make that choice. Living my purpose plays out the entire story exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And so that's how they do it. Like I literally saw there's It's like the movie Avatar. It's exactly like the movie Avatar. There's literally this like a case or something, some like a sarcophagus or something. It's like a big tube, and a big tube because they're really big. And so they literally, I saw myself. I was laid down in this tube, and they go into a deep dreaming state, and their consciousness projects in exactly like the movie Avatar. And so James Cameron, again, I'm pretty sure that he's in contact with Alpha Centauri beings, because there's just way too many connections. And again, this information came to me 2009. I don't remember when Avatar came out. My son was 5, I think, when we went to the movie. So it was 2009, maybe 2010 when the movie came out. But this information, like when I got it in the regression, it wasn't influenced by that at all. So it's synchronicity about what he shows in the movie. And so that in that technology, it's like when I'm there, I'm my true being, my higher self, or whatever we want to call it, is literally in stasis on Alpha Centauri right now, or on a planet around Alpha Centauri. And the way that the time is experienced is maybe 1 week. It's probably more like 24 hours that I live an entire human lifetime of full human experience. And when this body dies, at whatever point that occurs, my consciousness goes back and I wake up, and it's like the end of my work week, literally. And then
that's a long day.
it's a long day. and so with that though, it's like I got to experience this of what that transition is like. It's very, very difficult on these Alpha Centauri beings, because they are very high. They exist at a very high frequency. And their hearts are just gigantic. It's unconditional, universal love. And to be in a human body on Earth in the 20th and 21st century is like shockingly difficult. It's very, very hard. And so like I'll have to go through like therapy to process this human life. And then eventually when I'm ready, I will project back in, and most likely to the Earth. This is what I've been told is going on for me. And so I accept that as real, and I kind of allow that in the background, and then I have my full human experience.
Are you gonna get back after you finish?
Probably. It feels like I'm not done here for a while. I think the Earth needs a lot of assistance right now. But other beings also do this. I don't know what their technology is like, but I've seen the Alpha Centauri technology. Do we want to take a break for a few minutes before I go forward? Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. They originated in the Sirius star system. There's actually I don't know if you call it a legend, but there's this story that is the tale of the golden dolphin that is transmitted from people person to person as like oral tradition, that involves the history of the Sirian dolphin star beings. And I had that given to me at one point. And essentially what ended up happening was that there were these like elder dolphins and like young dolphins. They were not the like elder wisdom filled dolphins, and they wanted to explore the Earth. They wanted to explore reality on Earth, and they were warned not to come here because of the density. And that by projecting into the Earth, and if they were to manifest as a human being, that by having hands, they would get sucked into the density of the Earth reality, and they would get trapped. And so these young dolphins, they did it anyways, and they astral projected from Sirius into the Earth, and they came into the Earth and they got trapped. And they eventually were able to like liberate themselves out of that density, and maybe the elders helped them in some way, but now they're here and they manifest as dolphins, and they're helping us in so many ways right now. I mean, they work with people directly. I've had an encounter swimming with them in Hawaii where I had a lucid dream while I was in Hawaii, and I was told to wake up before sunrise to go swim out into the ocean alone, and that I would be found by a pod of dolphins. And I studied marine biology in college, and so I know that tiger sharks are around Hawaii. And I really did not want to go swimming before sunrise in the ocean, and I did. And I was found by a pod of 11 dolphins, spinner dolphins, and 2 of them left, and 9 of them stayed with me. And they worked with me they were with me for like 45 minutes, swimming in a circle around me constantly. It's kind of like the UFO. They were bombarding me with really high frequency sound that I was hearing as clicks and whistles, but they were talking directly to me. And one of the females has remained as one of my guides, and they totally activated my DNA in different ways. And so these, I mentioned them because of that. They are star beings, even though they're living on Earth. And they, like when I was younger, I would often wonder, like, why don't the dolphins jump over the nets?
Yeah, right.
Because you go to SeaWorld and bottlenose dolphins can jump 20 feet out of the water. There's dolphins, orcas, any of them, they do not need to get trapped. In Japan, like in Taiji, they use like banging underwater to disorient them, but like when the nets are there, they can jump over the nets. And so what I've been told by the dolphins is that these dolphins, it's like their soul arrangement. They allow themselves to be captured and they allow themselves to be killed because they can project out of their body immediately. Like they're not dying. The physical bodies die, but it's like they're offering themselves in service in order to wake up humanity to what's going on. And part of the reason why the dolphins and like why in the Faroe Islands, which is connected to Denmark, right? The Faroe Islands, they kill pilot whales. Those practices are occurring in the world in order to try to limit the consciousness. It's being done as an attack on consciousness because these beings are holding a very, very high frequency on the planet right now. And by the what I call the system of control, the people that are participating in those actions at an organizational level, like they are attempting to clear consciousness from this planet, and it's not going to work, but the dolphins offer themselves, the pilot whales offer themselves up as like sacrifice essentially in order to wake us up, and it's working, so that's dolphins and whales. The whales, again, they come from a planet that's orbiting primarily around Sirius A. Sirius B, Sirius A and B, it's a binary system. The 2 stars rotate around each other. And there's also Sirius C, which is a brown dwarf that like rotates way far out from them. And they have planetary systems. And again, the 2 planets where the whales and dolphins come from are very much like Earth. They have oceans. There also are human beings that are from Sirius, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So the true history of humanity on Earth. And so all of this information now that we'll move through is based on my direct experience, unless I state otherwise. Like if I've gotten this information from somebody else, I'll say that. So star beings and the creation of humanity. Lemuria, Mu, we already mentioned. Atlantis, we haven't mentioned, but that's connected. And then the Anunnaki. Is everybody familiar with the Anunnaki?
Mm-hmm.
No? So the Anunnaki, well, I'll explain it when we get there. Okay. So there's my friend again. So the star beings, this is what I'm told is that throughout human history, at the very beginning of human history on Earth, that the star beings were instrumental in the creation of humanity. The human shape, having a head, 2 arms, 2 legs in general, that shape is very, very common throughout the universe. I've heard, or have been told, I think it was maybe Corey Good in one of his interviews with David Wilcock, says that something like around 80% of all life that we recognize as life in the universe takes some type of humanoid form. We happen to be connected to primates. It's like we're closest to the monkeys, but there also are humans that are birds, humans that are reptiles, humans that are like dolphins, fish, and we take cats. That's another one for sure. That would be scary a little bit maybe, but there are many different forms, and so it's a very common vehicle for consciousness. It's very adaptable. I'm told that there were many races of star beings that took elements of their DNA and they combined it with this kind of neutral human template, and that's what we ended up as. So we are connected in with many races. Closest we were just talking about, Syrians, Pleiadians, very close to us in appearance and in our DNA makeup. But the Alpha Centauris participated in that. The star beings have been here for a very, very long time, much, much older than humanity. They've been here for millions of years, even older, with what this whistleblowers, out of the secret space program, they call the ancient builder race. That race of beings was here maybe billions of years ago. It's very, very old. And they are definitely here helping us right now, primarily through psychic communication is some type of communication is primarily how they work with us. But in some cases they are directly assisting us, or performing healings and different things, or having close encounters like I had. Lemuria and Mu, this is connected in with the star beings. They were in direct contact. These are ancient civilizations. This one civilization is known by two names. It's called Lemuria due to about 100 years ago, anthropologists and scientists that saw lemurs that were scattered all around the Indian Ocean, from Madagascar all the way over to, I don't know, I guess Indonesia maybe or something. And they said the only explanation for that would be a continent that existed in the Indian Ocean, and they named it Lemuria after the lemurs. But the older name is Mu, and it was in the Pacific Ocean primarily, although there was some continental landmass in the Indian Ocean. They are directly connected to the inner Earth cities. So is everybody aware that there are actually cities inside the Earth? Or have you ever heard of that? Yeah. That's actually in kind of the beginning of my spiritual journey. I was taken in meditation into these cities, and I didn't know what the heck I was seeing. And years later, then I came across Drunvalo Melchizedek writing about traveling in these light tunnels into the inner Earth cities, and then Corey Good in the last couple of years describing being taken into these inner Earth cities. And what he describes is exactly what I've seen for years. And so it is true. I mean, I consider this to be absolute truth. There are cities inside the Earth, in the crust of the Earth, that are gigantic, miles and miles and miles. And they're inside of crystalline geodes, or massive caves. And they have very advanced human beings that are living in there. And so what I was told was that before the second destruction of Atlantis, roughly 50, 60,000 years ago, something like that, they went inside the Earth and they built these cities inside the Earth because the surface of the Earth was going to be destroyed in a big cataclysm. And so they're still there. We see evidence of these civilizations from the ancient times in Peru and Bolivia. This is a photo from Ollantaytambo. I was just there 2 weeks ago. This is a very special sacred well that is carved into the bedrock at the structure. There's bedrock coming up, and they carved this, and the water spills over it. And this is ancient. This is at least 10,000 years old. It's before the most recent destruction of Atlantis. They can't put a date on rock, but they'll tell us that this was made by the Inca, and that's just absolutely not true. Having gone there and actually touched it, and I got some of the water out of there. It's ancient. It's very, very, very old, and it is space age technology that made these structures.
I was there.
Oh, you went there?
And there's some gigantic stones up on the very top. And
yeah.
Huge.
They're
and
huge.
How do they get them over?
How do they get them?
And they'll
across
tell
the
you
valley?
they drag them down and then up
ludicrous.
This. No way.
Yeah, I think the next photo, this is Sacsayhuaman,
right.
Which is a different location. This is right outside of Cusco. It's right above Cusco. This, I haven't put the photos yet onto my laptop, so I have a photo from one I grabbed, but I have this exact same photograph my friend took of me standing in front of this rock. This rock is gigantic. They estimate that it weighs 75 to 100 tons. There are a few other stones that are there at Sacsayhuaman that are 150 tons. you can't even understand it from looking at a photograph. But when you're standing in front of these stones, the story that we're told about this is just garbage. It's absolute garbage. The people that did this were way advanced, and it was easy for them to move these stones. I have a friend that I'm going to see next week that lives over in Sweden, and she has studied with the Cueros up in the Andes, the medicine men and medicine women that live high up in the Andes at like 17,000 feet or something. And their story is that they're from the Pleiades. They have living memory that they came from the Pleiades to the earth many thousands of years ago. And their story about Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo and all of these structures in Peru, that they were built by using flutes. They played flutes to create a sound frequency that was the resonant frequency of the stone, and they would levitate them, and they moved them into place, and that the sound frequency made the stone soft, and that they were squished together to create these boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to see in the photo, but when you're there and you're looking at this, so the whole front of the stone is all rough, and it's been eroded by thousands of years worth of rain and wind, but the edges, which it's like the width of my finger, basically on either side of the edge there's about that much width that is smooth and it's round. They're all rounded in towards the edge where the stones come together, and then you look at it and they're like jigsaw puzzles. It's not possible, like, to think about it. You see the structure, it is like what they're telling us is an absolute fabrication. It's a lie. And what is there is incredible. And I'm told, my guidance is that this was made by the ancient civilization that we call Lemuria. It's a minimum of like 13,000 years old. It's probably much older than that. So yeah, anyhow, that's Sacsayhuaman. Incredible place, wow. And the most powerful place at Sacsayhuaman you can't even look at. There's the eyeball of the jaguar. Like Sacsayhuaman is the body, it's the head of a jaguar, and its body goes down into the city of Cusco. And the eyeball, which is the energetic center of the entire place, is completely off limits. You can't even see it. It's like blocked off, I guess, and you would have to go through some like walls. But a woman that lives there told me like that's the focal point. So yeah, anyhow, Atlantis, I assume everybody's familiar with Atlantis. Atlantis has had at least 3 rises of civilization. The most recent one ended at the end of the last ice age, approximately 13,500 years ago, like 11,500 BC. There's a window in there that's 11,500 to 9,500 BC. Grant Hancock has written his new book all about this, that's when the end of it was. There was a comet that hit the earth and like wiped out the civilization. They were primarily in the Atlantic Ocean, but also in the Mediterranean, South America also a little bit. They were very, very advanced. They had flying spaceship type craft. They were in direct contact also with star beings. And we see there's evidence of Atlantis all over, but the primary ones are going to be in Egypt and then Baalbek in Lebanon. Although like Malta, like if you go to Gozo in Malta, that's also Atlantean. This is Baalbek. Have you been to Malta?
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, the structures
The
at Gozo,
stone,
they're massive, megalithic.
Like made by the Flintstones,
right? Yeah. They're huge. These stones also, they weigh like 100 tons, and they're like, how did
Gigantic.
These people, these like primitive people that didn't even have the wheel, how did they do this? It's so stupid what they tell us. Here's a photo of Baalbek. There's a man right there. And this stone, that's one stone. This is the largest single stone that's ever been cut and put into place that we know of. They tell us that the Romans did this. This is the Temple of Jupiter, is what the Romans called it. But the Romans, they built all of this. The Romans built all around these ancient stones. And this thing weighs 2.4 million pounds, which to get an understanding of that scale, I tried to do the math about like how many automobiles go into 2.4 million pounds. And what I came up with was basically like you go to a super Walmart in the United States and you have like almost 500 parking spaces, and every single one of those parking spaces is filled with a car,
and then they're all crushed into something the size of one railroad car, because that's like the size of a railroad car. It's like 15 meters or like 12 meters long or something like that, a few meters tall. So that's the scale of that. And in 2016, there are only 10 cranes on the entire planet that are capable of lifting that weight. It takes you 6 weeks to position the crane to like move the weight just to lift it and to set it down. And so there are multiple stones this size at Baalbek. This is the biggest one. The other ones weigh like 1,000 tons, 900 tons, 800 tons. It's an inconceivable amount of weight. And yeah, the Romans did not build that. That's Atlantis for sure. The Anunnaki. So the Anunnaki, that's the name that the ancient Sumerian civilization gave to their gods. Their gods were actually there were probably 3 races of star beings that were coming and working with the ancient Sumerians. The most famous of which we know as Enki and Enlil. Enki was positive and Enki loved humanity. Enlil was a bit of a jerk and did not love humanity. He was like jealous of humanity. Why we talk about them is primarily it's related to gold and human beings being essentially made into slaves hundreds of thousands of years ago, and they altered our DNA. The Anunnaki were giants. I don't know if this is actually a true photo or if this is photoshopped.
I know.
Yeah, you know the photo. Yeah, so I mean, when you search for like giant skeletons on Google, you can get hundreds of images, and I just grabbed one. There's some that are like super clearly not real, but there have been giant skeletons that have been found around the world, and it just kind of goes into the memory hole. But anyhow, that's for illustrations purposes. You know that the Anunnaki were very large. And why I relate with them is primarily doing healing work within people's DNA to undo the implants or the mutations that were put into the DNA. These are kind of cool images. The Anunnaki are always portrayed as either like this, or there are 3 ways. I didn't include the third one. There's like the guy on the left that is a bird-shaped human that is very tall, has a pine cone in his hand, wearing some kind of device on its wrist, and then holding what looks like a little man purse, like a little handbag. And the other Anunnaki are doing the same thing, holding a pine cone with that little handbag, and they have this stylized long hair and tall heads. And so this image here, what the archaeologists tell us, is that this is an image of the Anunnaki doing something with the sacred tree of life or something, some tree like a frankincense tree or something like that, which is ridiculous because you look at that and that's very clearly multi-strand DNA. And whenever you see a pine cone in the ancient world, it's talking about the pineal gland. Every single time there's, why is there a 20-foot tall bronze pine cone in front of the Vatican? It's because they understand what the third eye is all about, right? So that's just some, carvings that are 4,500 BC or something like that, ancient, carved into the side of a temple. And I believe that that's showing us evidence literally of the star beings. So how are the star beings working with humanity now? One of the primary things that they're doing is they're working with our DNA. They're helping us to evolve our DNA. They're helping us to heal some of the problems that came in with the Anunnaki. There's a lot of technology right now being employed against us that is altering our DNA, primarily GMOs. Like GMO food, do not ever eat anything that is GMO. The whole purpose of that is to create a distortion in our DNA. Also chemtrails. Are you familiar with chemtrails?
No, what's that?
Chemtrails are aerosols that are sprayed out of very large airplanes, and they're primarily composed of heavy metals like aluminum and barium and strontium. But they also contain polymers, so like plastics that are nanoparticles. So they're using nanotechnology, and the airplane flies and you'll see a big long trail which looks like a contrail, a condensation trail, but it doesn't go away. It stays and it spreads and it covers the entire sky. And so you get a layer of this like silvery material in the sky. And in Europe, Europe has had a lot of it happening. Where my friends live up in the very north of Sweden, it just started happening in the last year. And yet there's airplane traffic has been flying over them for decades, but only in the last year have these chemtrails become present. Where I live in the Southwest in the United States, we get hammered. And it's being done in some ways to suppress our consciousness, but it also is introducing nanotechnology into our bodies, which is not good. So yeah, there are a lot of ways that our DNA is being affected with technology now. So the star beings are helping us with that. Crop formations. The star beings are involved in crop circles. It's not the only thing that's creating crop circles, but they're definitely involved, and I'll show us some pictures. They are involved with solar activity. This is the Sphere Being Alliance, the alleged name of these groups that Corey Goode is representing, allegedly. Again, I can't prove it, but much of what he talks about directly confirms my own experience that I've had from long before I knew who Corey Goode was. So I really feel that his information is valid in many ways. But the Sphere Being Alliance, this is what they talk about, that these gigantic spheres that are the size of planets inside of our solar system right now, that they are affecting the sun's activity, trying to support us so that we will be ready for the big solar events when they occur. And then, one of the last things maybe is that channelings, people channel star beings, and this is probably the most common way that we get interaction with them. Not all of the channeling is real. I think that it's people that are able to tune in to other frequencies become easy targets for receiving information, right? And some of the things Corey Goode talks about is that there are inner earth beings that are communicating, and they portray themselves as star beings so that we don't look inside the earth. It's like we look out there, right? So just as a point of observation with channeled information is you really use discernment, use your own discernment around any of the information, and if it resonates with you as truth, then take it in. If it doesn't resonate, just ignore it. That's how I approach it. I feel like opening the Sedona Journal of Emergence, which is like all full of all these very famous channelers. There's maybe 15%, 20% maybe of the information in there I feel is actually validly being channeled. The rest of it is distortion or ego and other things. But that's my opinion. So yeah, our DNA, just kind of quickly to talk about this, I work with the DNA a lot, and this is part of how our consciousness is evolving in the world right now. There's two-strand DNA, which is kind of our typical model, like that, two strands with amino acids going between them, kind of forming the like rungs of a ladder. That's how science understands DNA to function, is being this two-strand molecule. What I see is very different. I see it as holographic, and that there are everybody in the world has been activated energetically to have 12-strand holographic DNA. Some of that has happened because of star beings. Most of it is because of the sunlight that is coming to us right now has been activating our DNA. There's also what I call crystalline DNA. Some people have their DNA, the 12 strands, instead of being like 12 strands in like a twisted bundle, it's like 2 hexagons. And the 2 hexagons interact with it. So you'll have 6 arranged in a hexagon and 6 arranged in a hexagon, and they counter-rotate through each other. So they're twisting like through each other, and it creates a torus. So you get that toroidal energetic flow, but the shape of it being arranged as 2 hexagons is crystalline, because a quartz crystal has 6 sides. So I see that in about maybe less than 20% of all the people I work with have this crystalline shape in their DNA, and it's related in some way to their like soul mission or their purpose. It does something different with how the energy manifests. And then going beyond, because DNA is a hologram, it can open into this whole potential that is like a fractal pattern. So the 12 become 144, the 144 becomes like 1,024, and then it just goes out and out. And it's like, how many strands of DNA does God have? You know, it's like it's a fractal pattern that is maybe infinite.
The DNA itself,
Yes.
does it apply only to physical beings or?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, well, maybe. My understanding around the DNA is like things like crystals have DNA. It's very different. You know, it doesn't look like ours. But beings that are existing in an energetic state, like let's say like the Alpha Centauri beings are 6th density. They don't have to have a physical body. They primarily inhabit a physical form, but there are other beings I've encountered that have no physical form. They exist purely as energy. And those beings have DNA of some kind. Like, I mean, I don't know what their DNA looks like. I haven't actually ever looked, but I am hearing very clearly like they do have DNA. Because again, DNA is a light encoded filament, so it's light and it manifests in different forms, depending on whatever that form or that consciousness needs. DNA actually shows up a lot in movies. And I included this clip. This is from when I teach the workshop. I wanted to include this clip, which I think will work, from the movie Tron Legacy, which has this incredible sequence where they show holographic DNA in the movie. And when I took my son to see this movie on his birthday, it opened on his birthday. And, I loved the original movie Tron when I was a kid. It was so cool, and the computer animation. And so I thought, I'm going to take my son to go see this movie. And lo and behold, there's this sequence with holographic DNA that is exactly what I see when I work with people's DNA. And I freaked out, like watching this on the movie screen. It was just incredible. So I think that this should work if I click it. Oops, what did we do? Yeah. So what we're seeing here is, this is Jeff Bridges as the original actor from the original movie. And this woman has been injured. She has half of her arm chopped off. It's Olivia Wilde is the actress. And they access her holographic DNA in order to heal her. So that's kind of cool. I have to identify the damaged code. This is exactly what I see when I work with DNA.
But didn't you write it? Some of it. The rest of it is...
So like right here. Okay? So that's multi-strand DNA with the little bits of yellow are the actual damage or the implant within the DNA code. And this is exactly what I see. And I've been seeing this for several years before this movie came out.
She's the miracle man. Everything I ever worked for.
So now he's going to clear the damage.
The human condition. I always thought that was just a plot line. In our world, she could change everything.
So that's what I do. And then
check that out.
You send it back to source, and it gets transmuted, and it begins rebuilding new code. So there's an upload from source into the DNA. And so that, and then they close the hologram where it gets uploaded into her body. All right, so now it's uploading, and her arm begins to rebuild itself. And so this is, I believe this with all of my being, that this is the future of healing in our world. That we literally, like, people, soldiers coming back from Afghanistan can like regrow their legs. This is real. And when I saw that, I mean, I flipped out. I was like, oh my God, my son is kind of looking at me weird. And but it's so true that that, oops, what do we got? We got our, let's close, get back to my slideshow. Uh-oh. I don't know how to work a Mac. No. Open Office? No. And help.
I don't know so much about it.
Well, it's, yeah.
Did you close it or did you just shut it down?
Oh, you know, it was
Program
in
your
the,
head?
it was in the mail, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was. Oops.
Oops.
This one. There we go. I have been a Windows guy my whole life, and I don't know how to do that. There we go.
Very good.
Thank you. So, tech support. Oh wow, it's in English now. That's cool. I can figure that out. When it was in Danish, it was a lot harder for me to understand.
Thank you. Be careful with your chair on the picture behind you. Oh yeah, please.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. So so then DNA, like crop formations, these are the star beings are definitely involved in this phenomenon. Is everybody familiar with crop circles? Or is anybody not familiar with them? A little bit? No? Cool. So, they've been around for a very long time, actually. I've done some regression work around the crop formations, and part of it is related to the Earth, like to Gaia, that when Gaia needs to introduce information to humanity, Gaia uses crop circles sometimes to do that. And so we have, like, in recorded history, they're very old, but I would suspect that in different ways they've been around for thousands of years, maybe. A lot of them are authentic, being really created either by star beings or by the Earth. Many of them are fake, with people tromping around in the field, and they're very easy to tell the fake ones a lot of times. Primarily why they're coming to us, there are two different things about them. They're activations. They carry frequencies inside the formation that when we look at them, it activates things within our being, within our DNA, within our energy body. They're also multidimensional. So the way in which you should see this, like when you see one that's a circle, you want to see it actually as a sphere, like coming up above the ground and going below the ground. And when you shift your perspective like that, the images take on a whole other thing, and it begins to activate your energy in a different way. So the crop circles are one way for sure that the star beings are working with us. These are 3 of them that are authentic, that have shown up over the years. This one and this one both showed up in the same year, which was, this was on the summer solstice of 2012. And it showed up over a period of 10 days in 3 stages. But from when it finished, from top to bottom, is the largest formation ever. It's like almost 500 meters, 1,500 feet tall, so like 470 meters or something from top to bottom. And all of this is Mayan. It actually is like Mayan glyphs that the Mayans used to write with. Although I don't know if anybody's ever translated it, but it is Mayan. And it's like how, the Mayans, according to Corey Good, the Mayans ended up in the Pleiades. They didn't eat themselves. They didn't get killed. They left. They literally vibrated out of here, and I know that that's true. Same with Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, the Chacoans, they vibrated out of the reality. But according to Corey Good, they went to the Pleiades, and they're actually coming back now, and they're helping human beings like recover from a lot of the trauma. But yeah, this is also Mayan. That was in the same summer of 2012. Yeah, pretty incredible. So I would definitely pay attention. Every year they start usually in April or May, and just check out the websites in the spring and follow it through the summer, and you receive activations. So the sun, again, I mentioned that the star beings are affecting the sun. Our sun is connected to every other star and is connected to the great central sun of our galaxy. So, when I had that experience of the great central sun, information and different energies, they come from the great central sun and they go to all the different stars in the galaxy. It's uploaded instantaneously. It doesn't have to travel the distance. It's uploaded energetically. And what ends up happening is our sun then has all of this activity, like solar flares or coronal mass ejections, which which is a CME. All of this is linked into our consciousness. So there have been studies done in Germany. I know specifically a few years ago they did a long-term study of measuring people's consciousness in relationship to the solar activity, to the electromagnetic fields from the sun's activity, and they found that people, if you are a positive person that practices spiritual practices, those people, when exposed to the solar activity, they experienced expansion. They experienced expansion of their consciousness, they increased their positivity, whereas people that did not have those types of practices like meditation or yoga, people that were a little bit more fearful, more like ordinary and plugged into like the ordinary reality, those people experienced increases of fear and constriction. So what that tells us is if the sun is this big energy, obviously, and it's supporting us right now, if you consciously try to engage the reality in a positive way, you're going to get supported by doing that, right? So it's, whoa, hello, where'd you go? What happened to my slideshow? Where is it?
You have to go to the mail.
I have to open it again through mail. I wonder why it closed and it didn't. Oh, that's. You're so smart. Thank you. I don't know what happened. So it's definitely the sun is linked into our consciousness, and the star beings are supposedly supporting us now because the sun is about to have a massive activity that is going to trigger a mass ascension. But according to Corey Good, that activity is being prevented right now so that we can kind of accelerate our own growth, so that when this happens, it won't just like blow us away, but we'll actually be able to move with it consciously. And I hear that this is true. I was, again, before Corey Good ever went public, I was being told that there were these giant spheres in our solar system. And then he comes out years later and says there are these giant spheres in the solar system. And I'm thinking, okay, that's cool, good to hear. So, next, right? Next. What happened? Okay. Well, these are actual photos from the Solar Dynamics Observatory of the sun. That's a coronal mass ejection, or it's actually probably a Hyder flare, but that's an explosion coming off of the sun. And so, these are the things like what Corey Good has been saying recently is that when this big event happens, which is supposed to happen sometime between 2017 and like 2021 or something like that, I think, that when this event actually happens, it's like the entire outer corona of the sun is going to release at one time. And that's an inconceivable amount of energy coming off of the sun. And so that's supposedly what's being prevented right now. The spheres are working to kind of prevent the sun from blowing off its outer layer.
Well, there's something, Barack Obama, he issued something that the United States should look up on space weather. So he gave he raised a fund. I'm not sure about the news what it says, but it has most definitely to do with the space weather.
Yeah.
And it's something it's up in the President of the United States has, and it's recent news actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. That doesn't.
You should just check space weather. If I got Barack Obama, something will come up. I'll promise you.
Well, see, and that's very interesting because there's a lot of this information is crossing over into the mainstream consciousness, and we have seen very interesting things happen within the United States government in the last couple of years, where in this last year, I think it was last year, there was some obscure law that got passed that is called like the 2015 Space Resource and Utilization Act, or some weird name, right? But basically the language of this law prevents any past or future liability for actions that are being taken in space in the past or in the future. And so they basically, a law was passed that would limit their liability from anything that's occurring right now that is illegal in outer space. And it's like, why would they pass that law unless they're doing something illegal? You know? And so there are funny things like that that keep slipping through that are being caught within our mainstream awareness. So it makes me think that Obama, like,
Yeah, well, they're
Yeah.
gonna have like a huge fund about being protecting Earth from space weather and so on and so on.
yeah,
So you just when you show this,
yeah. I mean, they know about, at certain levels of the government, they know about everything that we've talked about tonight. So we'll see what happens. We're in a very, very interesting time right now. So I guess like the most common way, again, we already mentioned channeling. This picture on the left, this is an artist's representation of the blue avians, who are these very high, they're also sixth density beings that Corey Good is allegedly in contact with. I've been working with these guys since 2009. And I actually thought they were like angels when I started working with them. They are human, but they're birds, not primate. They're also tall, very, very high consciousness. And this is the nose or the beak is different than what I see, how it's portrayed here, but everything else is almost identical to what I see. They're literally covered in these tiny, tiny little feathers, like hummingbird feathers. So some people are, have begun saying that they're channeling these beings. I've been in contact with them again since 2009, so it was really cool when he went public talking about big blue birds. This is I grabbed this from my friend Janet up in Sweden. She posts lots of stuff on sacred geometry and sometimes channeling. And this is saying the Andromedans. Andromeda is a galaxy. So this is kind of one of these funny things around channeling is that, that's like saying I'm talking to Milky Wayans, it's a big place. There are 100 billion stars in Andromeda's galaxy. So I'm sure there are human beings, that look like this, but most of the time when I encounter Andromedans, they don't have physical bodies. They're very, very high beings, which I think I talk about maybe in the next one. So, move forward. There we go. So the star beings that I directly work with. So I just thought I would include a list of everybody that I've primarily will talk to. There are a couple of others that have entered here and there specifically for clients that I'm working with, but I didn't really include those. So primarily Alpha Centauri. That's my primary guide that I work with. Is obviously the beings that were on board that spacecraft. That's okay. The Syrians I work with directly either through dolphins or through the human Syrians that I work with. They primarily are helping human beings now with our third eye. It's almost always related to a person's pineal gland or their hearing, the actual like auditory canal and your ability to receive frequencies through sound. That's almost entirely what I work with Syrians. Although I am told that the Syrians are one of the primary groups that is like actively involved in fighting the Draco, the negative reptilian beings. So the Syrians are helping in that way. The Pleiadians, they're from the Pleiades. I definitely work with them. That the Pleiadians are, from like Bringers of the Dawn and these other channeled sources. The Pleiadians also are home to the like local government of our local star cluster. Is based in the Pleiades. There's a planet that orbits around the star Alcyon, and Alcyon is like our local central sun. All of this part of the Milky Way orbits around Alcyon, and as we orbit around the great central sun. So the Pleiades is very, very important. Do we all know where the Pleiades is in the sky? Can everybody know how to find the Pleiades? No? It's really easy. We get to see it now in the winter. It's from like the late summer all the way through until the spring. You'll see the Pleiades at night. So the easiest way to find it is to find Orion. Yeah. So does everybody know Orion? What Orion looks like? Orion's very easy to see because of the 3 belt stars, 1, 2, 3, and then there are 2 legs that come off of the bottom of Orion, and then he has arms like sticking up. So Orion is very easy to recognize, and when you look at Orion, if you follow Orion's left leg down, it like you go out into space, and the brightest star in the sky is right there. That's Sirius. So Sirius is very easy to find if you can find Orion, and it's easy to find because it's the brightest light in the sky, other than like Jupiter and Venus. Those are the only things brighter, in the moon. But then you go the other direction from Orion. So if like Orion's belt and his legs are like that, you go that direction, and off to the right as you're looking up in the sky, and you'll see a V. The V is the head of Taurus, and the V has Aldebaran is one of the stars. It's a big bright red star. And then you move just to the right of the big V, and you'll see the Pleiades then. It's a very clear grouping of 7 stars. There's actually a lot more than 7, but like naked eye you can see 7 stars. And so that's going to be off to the right from Orion. And so those are, Orion has, there are civilizations in Orion for sure, like Betelgeuse and Rigel, they have civilizations, but I don't work with the Orions very much. And a lot of people say that the Orions are negative, but again, there are a lot of stars in Orion's constellation. So Sirians, Pleiades, Alpha Centauri we can't see in the northern hemisphere. You have to be south of the equator to see Alpha Centauri. Alpha and Beta Centauri. Also, I do work with the Beta Centauri beings. They're different. They don't look like that. They're kind of shorter and squattier. So Andromeda. Again, Andromeda is a galaxy. It's not inside the Milky Way. It's its own galaxy. Andromeda is an ascended galaxy. The entire galaxy, on average, is at least 5th density. So what we would consider ascended relative to us. Many of them are much, much higher. Most of the time when I'm told that somebody is from Andromeda or some consciousness is Andromedan, they're like, it's almost like God. I mean, it's like I see them like clouds that are like in front of the sun. They're like a cloud that's been lit up golden. They don't have any form. Their consciousness has no limitation. They can go anywhere. They can talk to anybody. They're very, very high beings. And so those are the Andromedans that I typically have encountered. The blue avians I work with. Arcturans, so that's Arcturus. Do we know Arcturus? No? Arcturus, in English we call it the Big Dipper. It's the Great Bear constellation. So the Big Dipper, you have the Big Dipper with its handle. And if you follow the handle out into space, there's a very bright star that is called Arcturus. And so Arcturus is also an ascended civilization. And this is actually a painting of what looks like an Arcturan to me when I've encountered Arcturus. They're spacecraft. They're made out of light. It's like a light craft, a light ship. And I've encountered them, working with clients, but at one time I've had a direct encounter with them when I was in a ceremony, and the craft came in above the house that I was in, and it was an undescribable frequency, just like this like humming, incredible frequency and light. Like there was all this light that I was seeing, and the frequency did this healing on everybody that was in the ceremony, and they're very high beings. Vega, that's the star from the movie Contact.
That's a good movie.
Yeah, good movie. Vega is an incredibly advanced civilization. Vega is a stargate. So the actual star of Vega is a stargate that is like a way in to our universe. So information and energy from other universes pour into our universe. So not just our galaxy, but the whole universe. And the information pours in and it comes through Vega and is distributed then within our universe. The Vegans, they're without form now, but at some point, who knows, billions of years ago, maybe they were like human beings, that ascended, and they have just moved up and up and up. And so Vega is very, very powerful to connect in with. You can also see it. You see it primarily in the summer. And it's right next to the Milky Way. So like when you see the Milky Way going through the sky, if you look right overhead, there will be a really bright star right next to the Milky Way. And that's Vega. Aldebaran, I already mentioned, that's the head and the V that forms the head of the bull of Taurus, the constellation Taurus. And it's the very tip, it's a red star. And Aldebaran and Arcturus both, they are absolutely gigantic. The size of the star itself is like from our sun out to the planet Jupiter. It's like a billion miles or something in diameter. They're enormous. And there are planets that orbit around Aldebaran that has an advanced civilization. And then Regulus. Regulus is the star that is in the constellation of Leo. So Leo the lion, there's a bright star in Leo that is called Regulus. And my friend that lives over in Helsingborg in Sweden, she has a crystal skull that is from Mongolia that is carved and is connected in, it's carved out of calcite and it's directly connected in with Regulus. There's like, it's ancient, it's from like, it was in ancient Tibet. But the Regulus, the beings for Regulus are very, very high beings, and they're really short. They're kind of like ET. When I've seen them in meditation, they're really little, but they're extremely advanced. So yeah, those are the stars or the star beings that I typically will work with. Mostly it's Alpha Centauri, Sirius, the Pleiadians, and then a little bit for the guys in the middle, and then like rarely. I mainly connect with Vega in meditation, and that's just, it'll blow you away. It's awesome. So that I believe is, yep, that's my last slide, and therefore I'm done transmitting. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, if you have any questions, any questions burning, I would love to answer questions. Otherwise, we can. Wow, that's interesting. That's a very wordy thing. That was just a couple of weeks ago, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Executive order coordinating efforts to prepare the nation for space weather events. So I'll look that up. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what Mr. Obama has to say about our need
Was
to
it
prepare.
Obama that's going to say something about that?
Well, he did.
He did?
He already did.
He already had mentioned.
It was it was dated 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
This is White House.
yeah, White House press release.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's we're all familiar with disclosure, right? The disclosure movement or full disclosure. There are many, many things happening right now around disclosure where we see pieces of information being leaked in the media. Most of it is around this concept of partial disclosure, which maintains the control system. So it's like they'll give us this information, like saying, oh yeah, there's liquid water on Mars, or the moon Iapetus has weird ancient structures, or maybe there's liquid water frozen on Pluto. Like all this stuff has been coming out about our solar system in the last year, and almost all of that information is being like drip, drip, drip leaked to us to prepare us for this eventuality that they want to try to control the entire narrative around the UFO technology and the beings. Anne and I were talking about this earlier today, that it's, as it is right now, it's primarily because of the energy systems. This spacecraft that I encountered was bigger than a car, but smaller than a bus. It was like smaller than a bus. And the energy that was coming off of that craft could power New York City, I would guess. Yeah, it was an enormous amount of energy, and this craft can travel through time. It can travel. Like I've seen things. I've witnessed UFOs. I saw one once. I was flying on an airplane from New York City to Grand Rapids, Michigan. So flying from New York City to Grand Rapids, Michigan, you fly right over one of the Great Lakes, right over Lake Erie. And as it was at night, it was a red eye, like at 10 at night. And we're flying over Lake Erie, and I'm looking out the window to my left, and I see the city of Cleveland. Cleveland is about maybe 2 million people, 1.75 million, it's a big city. And I grew up in Ohio, where Cleveland is located, so I recognize it. That's Cleveland very clearly. And right above Cleveland, at about half of the altitude that my airplane is flying at, I saw a ball of light. And immediately I thought, that's a UFO. and I'm watching it, and my mind was just like going through all of these potentials. And I looked around on the airplane. It was a very small airplane, and nobody else was looking out their window. Everybody was either asleep or reading or working. So the only people on board the airplane that saw this were the pilots. And for some reason I didn't even think to ask them when we landed, but whatever. So we're flying for several minutes, and so I see Cleveland over there to my left in front of me, and we're like approaching, and Cleveland is like, we're coming alongside Cleveland. The entire time there's this bright ball of light floating directly above Cleveland. And when we came directly alongside it, this ball of light shot,
Wow.
gone. Like, it went from 15,000 feet into outer space, gone, in less than a second. And I mean, it was moving at probably like 100,000 miles per hour. It's not possible, right? With the physics how we understand physics, what I observed is not possible. And yet it occurred. And to produce energy to actually make that happen, I mean, if we had access to that energy, you know, there's no need for oil, there's no need for war, there's no need for any of it, you know? And that's what the whole thing about disclosure is about, is that by preventing the acknowledgement of UFO technology and the presence of the star beings, you can control the entire population of the planet. And as soon as that becomes a real thing, one of the first questions, other than like, well, where do they come from, will be, how did they get here? You know, and when you're answering questions about like, how does a craft travel from 475 light years away, you know, you need to think about the energy that's involved, and like the entire system of control falls apart at that point. So it's going to be very interesting these next several months through the next year. I think big things are going to happen, and hopefully, you know, we need to fearlessly support the release of all of this information, and it doesn't need to come from the government. Like, the government doesn't want to do it; they're part of the system. So we need to we need to bravely, I feel, we need to bravely share this information. We need to support it in a way that is very real, and you know, and we need to force then the acknowledgement of these things happening in our world, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing what I do. So,
Question.
yeah.
So what are we going to do when they are supposedly doing the force flight alien attack?
Yeah.
What are we going to do then?
Oh, thank you. So that whole thing, you know, what they call Project Bluebeam, or it's got different names. Project Bluebeam is one of the big ones. You know, that I'm told that whole situation is going to be prevented, and that there actually have been plans in the past to have a fake alien invasion using secret technology that the governments are in possession of, and they would make them out to be like alien UFO technology. But that whole situation will be prevented, and part of the way that we can prevent that is by, again, spreading the information. Because if the information is out there, and then the exact thing we're talking about happens, it's not believable, you know. And so that there are many false flags that have been prevented in the last several years because information has been distributed by whistleblowers and other things. Beyond that, if there is an attempt, like if we see anything that's like an alien invasion, you know, I would say with almost entire certainty that is a false and manipulated situation. What I am told is the vast majority of the beings that are around here now, they have no interest in harming us. You know, they're either neutral or they're positive. There definitely are negative beings, though. You know, like the Zeta Reticuli, the little grays. I mean, I've encountered them energetically. The one encounter that I've had that was negative was with what are called reptoids. They're like grays, but they're tall.
And then again,
Yeah.
there are people talking about having positive experience with those kind of
Sure.
beings.
Yeah,
So,
totally. Yeah, totally. It's like, how do you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that I had, I mean, I don't really remember anything negative, but I'm pretty sure that I was hiking with a friend in Sedona, and we had like missing time that occurred. And I'm pretty sure that both of us were taken on board at Kraft because I went into it in regression, and they took sperm from me and they took eggs from her, and it was like something genetic that they were trying to do. But that wasn't with my permission, you know, and so therefore it's negative. But
To you,
yeah, to me,
but in a higher perspective,
it
not
might be extremely positive. I don't know, but yeah, for me, it violated my free will. You know, although at some level I probably agreed to it. So it's interesting. It gets, you know, the people that I've worked with that have had these experiences with grays. You know, like one of my good friends, she lives in Sedona. She thought that she was describing to me a dream, and it wasn't a dream. It was like she woke up and she couldn't move, and she like willed herself to turn on her light, and there were little grays in her bedroom, but they were gold. They were like golden colored, and they were like, you know, they were shocked that she had like turned on the light, and then they knocked her out again. And so when she told me this, I was like, we need to like, can I help you with this? There's like actually something going on, and she had implants in her DNA that had been put in there.